policy. Tomorrow night, Americans will hear President Obama's policies in a primetime address to the nation. Joining me now is Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Democrat of California, who serves on the House Armed Services Committee, and the Washington Post, Jonathan Capehart. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Rev.
Good evening.
Congresswoman, let me go to you first. What do you hope to hear from the president tomorrow night?
I want to hear a strategy from the president. I want to hear that he is committed to having the Congress take a vote on this action in both Iraq and if he does take steps to engage in Syria. And I also want to make sure that we know that there is a threat to the U.S. homeland. We've got to make that very clear so that we can engage in a manner that makes sense.
So
we also
there's a
need to
threat
make sure
to you. To you, it's very important that it's clear there is a threat to the U.S. homeland, and authorization by Congress seems to be important to you.
And finally, a coalition of support for engagement by many of the countries in the Arab League and sharing the burden. The costs of these engagements are very expensive, and there's lots of reserves in many of the Arab countries that are actually in harm's way with ISIL as well.
Jonathan, what message will the president be sending tomorrow night to the American people and, for that matter, to ISIS?
Well, one thing we know about the president is he knows he's leading a war-weary nation. Even though there's a poll out that shows that 90% of the American people are very, very concerned about some kind of threat from ISIS. But the president, I think, as the Congresswoman laid out, he's got to tell the American people what's going on, and he has to do so in very sort of in a candid manner. He has to tell them. It has to tell the American people what's at stake, why the United States is getting involved now in this effort, in another Middle East effort, when a year ago this time the president decided not to take action when Syria used chemical weapons against his own people, when the United States opted not to take any kind of serious action in other places around the Middle East. He's got to also show, as the Congresswoman just said, that the United States is not going about this alone, and that's something that the president has always made clear, that if any action takes place, it's going to be not just the United States, but the United States in concert with countries in the region who also have something at stake in the fight against ISIS.
It comes back to what you said, Congresswoman. How important, let me ask you to elaborate, how important that whatever is done in concert with other nations, other allies?
I think it's a very high priority. I cannot imagine that we would support the president going it alone. We have learned a horrible lesson in Iraq, and it's cost us so many lives, so much money, so much incredible perspective in terms of how we're perceived by countries in the region. I mean, they don't like what they see when the United States invades Iraq, when they say they have a red line and then that red line moves. They don't have a sense that we're there for the long run. And I think if we're going to be there for the long run, whatever it is, we've got to do it in conjunction with other Arab states.
Jonathan, the Huffington Post talked to GOP Congressman Peter King after the meeting with the former Vice President Dick Cheney. And he, quote, I asked if he saw any irony in Cheney coming to talk to Republicans about next steps in Iraq. King said firmly, no, because most of us think we did the right thing in Iraq. I mean, is that really the view among most Republicans in Congress, that Bush Cheney did the right thing in Iraq, Jonathan?
I think this current crop of Republicans on the Hill, they probably do agree with Vice President Cheney that what they did was the right thing in Iraq. But then there are a whole lot of other people within the Republican Party and across the country, no matter their political affiliation, who believe that the war in Iraq was wrong, that have done it, and that the reason why the president is, one of the reasons the president is giving the speech tomorrow night at 9 o'clock is because of that war in Iraq and the tempest that was unleashed by the toppling of Saddam Hussein.
Now, let me go back to you, Congresswoman, because Ted Cruz said America should go it alone against ISIS rather than seek a coalition. Listen to this.
In order that this action be done right, it must be led by the United States, unfettered by other nations' rules of engagement that might impede our effective action. Achieving some preordained number of countries in a coalition is not a strategy.
How do you respond to that, Congresswoman?
Well, you know, Ted Cruz is a walking time bomb, and I think we've seen it over and over again in Congress, where he is, you know, capable of saying and doing anything, bringing this country to its knees with the shutdown last year. It doesn't surprise me that he's trying to make headlines, and as we all know, he's probably running for the presidency. But I think it's really important, Reverend Al, to appreciate that there are so many foreign fighters that have come in to support ISIL. Some, you know, 10, 12,000 of them. Some even from the United States. So the interest of the American people is to know that whatever we do here is going to have some permanent results. And my big fear is that, you know, we didn't even think about ISIL a year ago. When we talked about Syria, it was one of a number of opposition groups, wasn't seen as anything of significance. This year, they're a barbaric institution that we're very concerned about. What's the next homegrown institution going to come out of the Middle East? Do we need to be concerned about Boko Haram? I mean, there are so many of these groups that are jihadists of nature and have their eyes set on doing great harm to the United States and to countries in the region. So I think we've got to be very careful as we move forward.
All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. We will certainly be seeing you tomorrow night, the primetime speech to the nation by the president from the White House. Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Jonathan Capehart, thank you both for your time.